Hey guys, this is Ahmed Siddiqui of the Anatomy of the Swipe, and today I'm super excited to be chatting with Simon Taylor, who's the co-founder of 11FS and also the head of content for Sardine. And today we're actually going to be talking about this new buzzy thing in the news where, Chase and Wells Fargo and all the big banks are getting together to build a digital wallet. So Simon, thanks for joining me today. I am super excited to be interviewing you for the first time, where it's always been the other way around.
No, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So, Simon, could you maybe just give everybody an idea of what this whole thing is about? Like, what are the big banks actually trying to do in your perspective?
So there's an article on the Wall Street Journal. It's still somewhat vague, but what it mentions is that there'd essentially be a new choice at checkout. And if you have a bank account with any of the major banks, so Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Capital One, in theory, you would be eligible to use this new button at checkout in e-commerce, and that would trigger some kind of payment from some new mobile app that they're building. So they haven't defined what that user experience would look like. That's still very much work in progress. But they have apparently 150 million consumer bank accounts that would be enrolled in this, and any credit or debit card from those banks would be compatible with this new way of paying at checkout.
They're calling it a digital wallet. Like, how do you define a digital wallet?
That's a great question. Wallet is one of those nebulous, confusing terms that gets thrown at just about everything. I think the canonical example is probably something like PayPal, probably something like Cash App, probably something like Venmo. This is a mobile app that's not primarily a bank. There may be banks somewhere in the background, but this is an app that stores money and helps me pay for things either via a debit card or off some other rail. And so you could technically include the Google Pays, the Apple Pays in that, but they don't primarily store money and let you pay. They're just a way to pay from accounts you already have. Whereas if you think about the traditional PayPal use case, it's I take some money from my bank account and I deposit into the PayPal wallet. I then pay from there, or it pulls directly out of my bank account. So it's this like intermediary thing in between the bank account and somewhere else.
Yeah, because I mean, the Wall Street Journal article made it sound like the big threat is actually Apple Pay. But I mean, based off of this definition, I mean, I don't necessarily know if that's really the case, right?
I don't think that's wrong. Like, because let's face it, the consumer mindshare matters here. So if I'm paying with Apple Pay and, oh, the bank's somewhere there in the background, I'm not using this bank thing. So I do think there's a power play there to be had. Also, banks create, manage consumer identities. They create and manage the payment rails. That helps them manage fraud. If Apple's managing identity, if it's managing fraud, if it's the brand that you see, then what is the bank but a dumb pipe? So I think there is some competitive threat there. The bank, Apple also has Apple Card. It's launching its own credit card. So I think it's not wrong to say that there's a threat there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, so they're talking about using the same company that's behind Zell to potentially power this. Is this kind of like is it like a Zell Pay, you think? Will there be like a button on a web page that says pay with Zell Pay, or like, what's your take on that?
That's what I immediately thought. But apparently, so early warning services currently does two things. One, it's like a way for the banks to get together and share data about who the bad guys are, who the fraudsters are. Like Chase says, hey, we've seen this bad guy before. Don't let them open an account at Wells Fargo or B of A. That was the first thing they did. Second thing they did was Zell. And so they're two for two. Like, actually, everybody thought Zell wasn't going to happen, and it did. But this third thing would be completely separate again, or at least that's what they're saying for now. I was with you. I was like, why wouldn't you just call it Zell? Because the consumer knows what Zell is, and if you saw the Zell button on a page, you'd kind of, on an e-commerce checkout, there's a segment of consumers for whom that's actually a good choice. Like they might trust that more.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been incredible how fast Zell has grown and how many people actually use it. I wouldn't say that it's great with the big banks. I don't see it as popular with the smaller banks and the community banks, et cetera. But there's what's your take on kind of Cash App and Venmo? Because so many of these consumers are actually, as you said, they're moving the money into the PayPal wallet or the Venmo wallet or the Cash App wallet. Do you think that the banks are actually concerned about that money movement out of their banks and into these other accounts and then being used there?
Yeah, so Ron Shevlin calls banks the paycheck motel because paycheck comes in and then it goes out to all of these other services. So what's the bank seeing? They're seeing the paycheck go in and then money go out to fintech app, to wallet, to something else. So there's a reason they're trying to compete with it. They must be seeing that themselves. So there's absolutely a threat there. The interesting thing about Venmo and Cash App specifically is they're becoming merchant and consumer ecosystems. They have a lot of merchants that they can offer loyalty, rewards, discounts to, and a lot of consumers on the other side. They can potentially start to build different payment rails. They can potentially start to build different experiences. The banks could get cut out of the whole thing entirely, or at least on some level they could, if these networks ended up with banking licenses. So you end up with these massive new players in the market that could really meaningfully displace the banks.
Yeah, because I mean, we're already seeing it on Amazon. You can check out with Venmo. And then at various merchants, if they're a Square merchant, you can pay with Cash App right there too. So yeah, I mean, there is this interesting like ecosystem that's getting built around these kind of digital wallets. And now it almost feels like the banks want to get a piece of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if nothing else, to defend the competitive threat, but also, cards are a big source of revenue for them. But if another payment rail emerges, you're going to bet they're going to want a piece of that. And maybe there's a new business model they can start to explore as well. Maybe they can do something interesting with loyalty reward points. Like the credit cards in particular do a lot in that space already. How is this an avenue to create growth for those organizations? Why shouldn't they have a seat at the table? You can see the rationale. I think my big question here is execution. So Zell is 2 for 2, but the banks have been trying to build digital wallets for as long as I've been alive, and not always, maybe not quite as long as I've been alive, but I'm getting old now. But there was a digital wallet called ISIS for a while. There's attempt to do NFC payment,
right?
So that consumer execution side of wallet, and maybe it's the term wallet that's throwing us here. Maybe it is an e-commerce button. Maybe it is the banks building their own buy now, pay later competitor. Maybe that's what's really going on here. But it sounds too early to say. There's a lot you could do here. And I get the business model. I get what they're trying to do. Let's see if they do it.
Yeah, let's see if they do it. No, this has been awesome, Simon. Thanks for the analysis on this. And, I really appreciate everything that you do on your newsletters and you being so thoughtful about these things. So really appreciate you jumping on quick to talk about this subject and hopefully providing a little bit of clarity to people reading these articles. So
hopefully so. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks again, sir. All right, you have a good one. And again, this is Ahmed Siddiqui with the Anatomy of the Swipe. And thank you all for watching. I will see you at the next swipe. See ya.